Having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, which assembled under every propitious circumstance, I should tremble for the result of a second, meeting in the present temper of America and under all the disadvantages I have mentioned. That's what James Madison said on November 2nd, 1788, in a letter to George Lee Turberville. 228 years later, the present temper of America is such that Madison's advice is more true now than ever. Gather close and listen to the advice of two modern-day patriots at George Washington's Mount Vernon.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Fry with the Patriot Coalition, and I'm here today at Mount Vernon with Don Fotheringham, who is a Marine Corps veteran of World War II, fought in Iwo Jima, and he is also the author of the President Makers. He's here in Virginia today, or in Virginia now, because he gave a presentation yesterday on his almost one-man army battle for decades against attempts to rewrite our Constitution. And over that period of time it's been called various things, an Article 5 convention, a conference of states, and now they're using the deceptive term Convention of States, which of course is not in Article 5 at all. Don, I'd like you to sort of tell us how you got started in this fight against this effort to rewrite our Constitution, and maybe some of the techniques or that have been employed against you and that you have employed to be so successful.
Well, okay, Richard. I think if we're going to begin this interview on a very candid plane, my first few years were failures. I did not start out successfully in this effort. It took me a while to catch on. For example, when a hearing was held, I couldn't figure out why they didn't vote, because I felt like we had won the debate, but the committee doesn't take a vote. And I finally figured that's because these were leadership bills, and the sponsor, either in the House or the Senate, didn't want to embarrass the leadership by losing the case right there and then. Secondly, they didn't want to list it as a failure because they were using that as kind of propaganda to encourage the other states to come on board. And they're still using that, by the way. Some of the newer convention resolutions have been passed have lists of states that they tell the other legislators, as long as all of these people have done it, and all you need to do is come in with us. And those lists aren't exactly accurate, because I helped repeal some of the states that they have on the list, so I know they're just using it for false impetus to kind of keep the ball rolling. That's been my experience with the committees. It's a conservative movement, at least it's in conservative colors, and therefore some of the best legislators in the country support the call for a constitutional convention. They don't know what they're doing, but they think it's the conservative thing to do.
Now, I know that you had said yesterday that you and Phyllis Shapley, who started Eagle Forum, basically started at the same time. A third party brought you both in. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about that and the strategy? I thought you had a great strategy that you and Ms. Shapley used.
Okay, well, the strategy was accidental. I just happened to go for the withdrawals, the rescissions, while she was working on holding off the new states. We didn't really collaborate on that, although it was a very good idea. The way we got into it, when Congress started receiving an abundance of applications from the states, and they were piling up, they looked around and they said, well, we're going to have a convention here pretty soon, and we really don't know what we're doing. So in 1979, the Senate scheduled hearings. The subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary was the subcommittee on the Constitution, and that was the body that held the hearings. And they brought in some fantastic educators, top men in the legal field. Charles Rice from Notre Dame, Charles Black from Yale, Gerald Gunther from Stanford, and these guys really knew what they were talking about, and they came without an agenda. Their purpose was, here's what the documents say, and here's how we feel about it. Well, the committee really wanted their suggestions on procedures. They didn't have any, because they said, you're not entitled to proceed with this. It's the convention that does that, and these men actually accomplished something the committee wasn't even planning on. They discouraged the committee entirely. Well, maybe we don't want to go this way at all. So the Democrats on the committee formed an organization called Citizens to Protect the Constitution. And they put ahead of that committee the chief clerk and deputy administrator of the hearings, a young woman by the name of Linda Kingsbury. And she started out immediately seeing that these Democrats are not going to stop these Republicans, because the Republicans think they're being opposed only because the Democrats don't want the balanced budget. So she called Phyllis Schlafly, and she called me. She wanted to get the Eagles involved. She wanted to get the Birchers involved, so that we could have people on the conservative side opposing conservatives, rather than try to bipartisan the program. So that's how it began.
And back at that period of time, I mean, we know from our research that the progressive powerly, if you will, as well as the so-called conservative or status quo conservatives, are basically working together now to bring about a rewrite of the Constitution. You kind of have the Koch brothers and their dark network on one side, and George Soros would be another on the other side.
Yeah.
Back at that, when you first started, was there any kind of underlying unity between them, or was it really a partisan?
In the beginning, the Koch brothers weren't in the picture, to the best of my knowledge. What was in the picture was the Ford Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, and I say Ford, and several other foundations that cast a lot of suspicion on the whole movement, because we know that their goals are one world goals, and they're not exactly the world's greatest constitutionalists. So we knew immediately who wanted to get their hands on the Constitution. They had formed several organizations, one called the Committee on the Constitutional System, and I went over the roster of that, and almost all of the members of that committee were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. That fact was the motivation for opposing it, but that fact did not fly in the hearings. The hearings didn't want to hear that. The senators didn't want to hear anything about that. We don't want these conspiracy theories. We just want to know why you think this is a bad idea. So it was very, very difficult to use that, except that it helped us get people enthusiastically in opposition to the convention idea.
Well, and I understand that the Ford Foundation in '63, I believe it was, had funded a NGO to rewrite the Constitution, and they had retained Rex Tugwell, FDR's head of his brain trust, to do that. And they finished that, and it was started to being promoted in '73. And at that time, they were just after an Article 5. In other words, they didn't say it was limited. And some of the deceptions that they've used is then when they lost, they came back and said it was limited, and then it became a conference of states they wanted, and now they're saying it's a convention of states. Yeah. So the deceptions have been both substantive and it's been procedural. Yes. What are some of the other substantive and procedural deceptions that these people have made in order to try to get their hands on our Constitution?
Well, as you've indicated, the first thing they claimed was that this was going to be and they call it a constitutional convention, which they don't anymore. And that is one of the changes they made. they referred to it as a constitutional convention. The attorneys that opposed it referred to it as a constitutional convention, and named the pitfalls, the fact that there was no way on earth to control the subject matter that they deal with, or the procedures, or what they come up, what they conclude with. And some of them referred to it as the first convention as a runaway convention. Others said, well, it wasn't a runaway convention, it was just the consolidation in one place of the sovereignty of the people, which would mean that whatever they do is becomes the law of the land.
Right.
So the big point then was this. In 1787, we had righteous men with sovereign power, and God bless them, they used it nobly and unselfishly and unpolitically.
Much to our benefit.
Yes. Today, we would have the same sovereign powers consolidated in one place with unrighteous men serving themselves with that power. And that was...
And apparently with bad motives.
Apparently bad motives. We could guess what the motives were. Very few people said it, except I don't know if you remember Gore Vidal. He was a quite a famous college professor, and he had a lot of public limelight. He had an interview with the Los Angeles Times, and he made a statement. I'll paraphrase as much as I can. He said, I myself, I personally favor a new constitutional convention. But he said the radical right, who are posing as conservatives, are in order to get mammon and God back in the schools, in order to control abortion, in order to prevent flag burning, are bringing together the forces that are going to deliver the Constitution to us. And I've used that. In fact, I have that quote. I brought it last night. I didn't use it, but it's a great quote, but it showed exactly why the left would want this convention to come about, because they knew who would run it.
Well, it's a bait and switch.
It was
a bait and switch game.
A bait and switch. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting you said that it started out, they called it the Constitutional Convention. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even the current people that are running the current campaign, which started in 2008, 2009, have referred to this as a Constitutional Convention clear up into 2014.
Yes.
And in fact, the branding or the marketing phraseology that came out with the Conference of States was Alex in 2011. Mm-hmm. And then, like, some of the more prominent leaders didn't pick up on that until after 2014. So that was, I guess, a carryover of the Conference of States, which was a scam that they tried it was in the 80s.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what do you foresee for the future then? Is there, you know, what's the next scam or the next lie?
My feeling is this: if we continue to debate, even if we get a fair hearing, and that's not easy to come by,
right?
Maybe we can go back to that for another question. But if we had a fair hearing, the proponents of this, who are being paid off somewhere by someone somehow, have a tremendous motivation, unlimited traveling expenses, and they can jump on a plane like that, and I have to know what that costs, because I did that for a long time, buying an airplane ticket over the counter. You don't get those tickets for free.
No.
So my feeling is that if we continue to let them frame the debate, we'll never win. They'll keep on debating until they get enough states in and the convention will be held. What I think we need to do to win is to deal with the most fundamental aspect of what's going on, rather than, well, was it a runaway convention or wasn't it a runaway convention, or who are the delegates going to be, and what you know, like, say, the balanced budget idea is stupid because the
straw issues.
Yeah. That'll go on forever until we go above that. And I mentioned it last night. I think what we have to do is absolutely insist and let these legislators know where their power is. You, Mr. Legislator, look at your state constitution and you tell me what your powers are. All those powers will be statutory. Lawmaking, ordinances, regulations, all within the framework of that Constitution that binds you to it. Nothing in your authority gives you the power to create governments or to modify governments or to amend governments. You have no structural power, and a convention is a structure composed of the people of the United States who are superior to you, Mr. Legislator. And I think we have to make that point.
And I think you make an excellent point too. The states, the scam that's being foisted on the states and the people is that the states have to get involved and do these things in terms of a convention, which they have no power to do, when in fact the states have all the power they need to do. And in fact, the states, and really we don't have a republic, we have republics. We have a central government republic and we have 50 state republics.
That's right.
And each of those are sovereign or quasi-sovereign, and they have a duty under allegiance and protection to protect our rights, including from the central government. And if they would fulfill their responsibilities under allegiance and protection and protect our rights, not our person like they're trying to do at Homeland Security, then this would never have happened in the first place.
I'm sure of that. Yes. The state legislators are being subject to a very slick line, and it's really unfortunate. They're being told that our founding fathers gave them the responsibility that when a day like this comes and everything's out of control, that you, Mr. Legislator, are the ones who have the responsibility to do this right here under Article 5. And I've heard some of these persuasions, they get like this, the collapse of the nation is imminent. And if you don't act on it, your children and grandchildren are going to ask you what you did.
It's a crisis.
Yeah, it's a crisis. And they use this great emotion to get the legislators to say, well, yeah, I guess if I better do something because our founding fathers gave me this to do and I haven't been doing it. And they're falling for that.
Right.
Well,
and let me say this, your book, The President Makers, and I've just recently read this book, is an excellent book. It's probably, I would say, the best book out there in terms of a balance between detail and length. There are some books out there that are like 1,000 pages that not everyone has time to read. This is an excellent book that talks about the historical rising of the power elite and who's behind it and what they're doing. And there are many bits of wisdom in here, but the biggest pearl of wisdom, I want to read this for you. And I agree with this 110%. This is the big pearl in this oyster right here. It says, until that is time and money invested in building an informed electorate always pays off. Until that is done, no amount of time and money invested in a politician will lead to a lasting solution. That hit the nail on the head.
Good.
It's our fault for being ignorant and not doing our duty to protect our sovereign rights and the sovereign rights of our children.
Yeah. See, we have a lazy populace. We've had too much peace for too long. Too easy to get welfare. Too easy to not do anything and still have food on your table. And consequently, the average American is not vigilant, doesn't really care what's going on, it doesn't feel like that concerns him, while those who seek power and those who want to destroy the Constitution are just getting away with murder. So that's the reason that actually the last two chapters in the book are the solution. And none of those last two chapters are from me. They come from Madison and Hamilton and George Washington, who understood what the solutions would be, and I'll guarantee you it wasn't Article 5. Article 5 was not the solution.
Which, by the way, you would agree that Colonel George Mason did not draft, did not write as it in its present condition.
They've done a terrible thing to that great man. I'm sure he's very disturbed in his grave over what they've done to him, but they have concocted an absolutely false statement attributing that to George Mason. And when you read what George Mason actually said, it's the very opposite of what they're implying in this. But they're using George Mason. They're saying the great George Mason foresaw our day, knew the time would come when the federal government would be out of control, and therefore he provided Article 5 as a means of reining in an out of control federal government. Nothing could be more absurd. Number one, because this statement was attributed to him in the last 10 days of the convention, when everything had already been settled. They had already agreed that the control the average citizen will have is at the ballot box, and that when they dismiss those who are not abiding by the Constitution, the next replacement in that office will be very obedient, because you get kicked out for not obeying the Constitution. Sure. The second one that Madison gives, let me see if I can't find that in here. Madison's quote, I think, is fantastic. And if these convention guys were serious about finding a real solution, they would quote Madison, who offered a solution that is really superior to anything that they're proposing here. Executive fascination with war.
It's interesting how they're willing to misstate the history and skew the facts.
It's tragic. The truth is, it's a tragedy what they're doing.
Hide the hearings and
yes.
So on and so forth.
Yes.
Righteous people don't do things by deceptive methods. So that's one of my first indicators that their motives are bad.
Yeah, and the idea that, see, a liar will keep changing his story.
And they have.
And they have. And I don't know why they think nobody remembers what they said last year. Which is not in agreement with what they're saying this year. Let's see if I can find. Well, the founders knew what the answers were, and
well, yeah. If we just simply follow the Constitution and follow the principles of freedom, the Declaration of Independence, we'll be fine. It's the problem is we're getting askew from those, and that's what's leading us into the briar patch.
That's for sure. Pure motives. Okay, here we are. First of all, Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution states that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. The founders had a reason for that. First of all, the House was accountable. They had to come home every 2 years and check in, report what they'd done with the Treasury, and they were responsible for the Treasury.
Power of the purse, account for the power of the purse.
That's right. Alexander Hamilton said that the exclusive privilege of originating money bills will belong to the House of Representatives. Now, here's the statement I think is fantastic. If these guys want something that has some punch, James Madison's solution is this. The House of Representatives can not only refuse, but they alone propose the supplies requisite for the support of government. In other words, the House of Representatives not only draws money out of the treasury, but they can refuse to draw money out. And
which they've refused to do.
They have,
recently.
Yeah, and they have a few times in history. He says, finally reducing, as far as it seems to have wished, all the overgrown prerogatives of the other branches of government. Now these guys are talking about the overbloated government and they're going to rein it in. Well, here's the answer to overblown prerogatives. This power over the purse may in fact be regarded as the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people, obtaining a redress of every grievance and the carrying into effect of every just and salutary measure. So,
Absolutely.
now, since this had already been agreed upon at the time they claim George Mason made that statement, it makes George's statement ridiculous. It's already been taken care of right here.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Excellent book, excellent individual, and I just to wrap up, I want to thank you for your service in the Marine Corps.
Thank
and
you.
your fight for liberty in our armed forces.
Thank you.
And probably more importantly, for the fight that you have almost single-handedly waged over these last 20, 30 years.
Okay, before we close, I have to correct that single-handedly. I was not alone. I had an unusual blessing from God, and He led me. And that's where the credit goes.
Right, and that's what we
Okay.
need to get back to God.
That's right.